Well, it's
Sorry.
7:01, so why don't we go ahead and get started for
Oh,
those that
oh yeah, we got 21 people. Awesome. All righty. Well, hi everybody. Good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight for our Tiny Talks with Robin Butler. We are gonna get started with codes and standards tonight. Robin's got a presentation for us, and just want to ask you to hold your questions if you can. We'll have a little Q&A at the end. Yes, the recording will be available. That'll be in our YouTube channel. Whenever it's sent to me, it'll be uploaded if you want to go ahead and follow Noah Certified on YouTube. And just let's see here. Also, I was going to say that I do not think we're going to have a Tiny Talks in December. So I just want to wish everybody happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Thanksgiving. Whatever you celebrate, I hope that you enjoy it. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our NOAA certified CEO and founder of the company, our brainchild, Robin Butler. We also have a couple inspectors with us here tonight. We have Tony and Frank. So thanks for joining us, guys. Also have our IT guru, Jordan Miller. So thanks, everybody. Glad you're here. And Robin, you want to go for it?
all right, all right, all right. Thank you guys for coming. And I just want to tweak it just a little bit. If you have a question pertaining to something I'm talking about, go ahead and either put it in the chat so we don't forget it, or you and if Leanne, if you see something that's on a slide that I'm talking about, then go ahead and interrupt me on that one. And
Okay.
if you guys could put in the chat where you're from, so I kind of know where everybody is throughout the country or the world. It might be someplace outside of the U.S., but and what I'm going to be talking about today is mostly pertaining to the U.S., but there is one standard that I'll talk about that is an international standard that would pertain outside the U.S. So
All right.
anyway,
Well, you want to
that
know where they're from?
yeah,
We
yeah, go
got
ahead.
whoa. Scottsdale, Arizona, Colorado, suburbs of Chicago, Atlanta, Georgia. And we got Joe from San Jose. Hi, Joe. Baltimore, Maryland, Upland, California, another Georgia, Idaho, Toronto. All right. Well, I'm in Florida.
All right. Well, that helps me kind of make this talk a little bit broader than I would normally go. If I'm speaking in Georgia, I try to stick with the local building ordinances and standards and codes rather than more broad. So this will be a broad stroke of what's happening in across the nation, basically. So the challenge is for the next 40 minutes, there's a lot of confusion about tiny houses on wheels in the building and the zoning department. We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about the current activities in the US, and then we're going to talk about NOAA and our inspection process. And I want everybody to stay with me till the end because, well, let me ask you a question. Have any of you guys seen a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, tiny house all on one floor? Tiny house meaning less than 400 square feet. Anybody? Put it in the chat if you have. And Leanne, let me know if anybody has seen that.
Okay.
No? Well, stay with me till the end. We're going to show you how you can get free plans for that. All right. So when I was woken up about 2 o'clock in the morning by a siren, I went out, I got dressed, went outside, and I saw 3 doors down, my neighbor's house was burning. And when I went over there, when you're in a fire, the people were sitting up on the hill, wrapped up in blankets, and they lost everything. They lose in a fire. You lose your mementos, you lose your furniture, except what's on your back. And in this fire, they lost even more. They lost a husband and a father. And it was at that point that I really decided that I needed to do something to help build safer homes because accidents happen. And so we started NOAA. I really started to build houses and give them away was what I wanted to do. But as I was building these houses, I realized that it was a wild, wild west out there, and there wasn't any standards or codes that they were being built to, and the jurisdictions had no idea what to do with them. And that's why they were originally on wheels, because you would put them in the side yard or the backyard, talk to the neighbors, and hope nobody complained. But if they did, and code enforcement came out, you could always hook up to them and pull them away. So our mission here is to promote freedom to live safely, and that's not only in tiny houses, but in other alternative housing. Tonight's talk is going to be more about the tiny house and the tiny house on wheels. So what's the confusion? Here we've got a picture of a travel trailer, a park model RV, anything before 1976 would be considered a mobile home. After that's a manufactured home. We have modular homes and we have site-built homes, but there's a lot of confusion and what we call the gray area of where these tiny houses have been in the last several years. So can anybody put in the chat why we put them on wheels? Other than code enforcement, which I just told you. But can anybody else tell me why we put houses on wheels? Anybody? Leanne, let me know if we get anything. Or you can raise your hand and we can unmute you too. Or you can unmute yourself. All right. If nobody's going to answer, I'm trying to get some audience participation here, but I've got some ideas of why we put them on wheels. Number one, have you ever heard of traveling nurses? They move every 13 weeks. It would be wonderful if they could have their own home and take them with them. How about if you work from home and you want to travel, but you do, when you work from home, all you need is an internet connection and you can move around the country. They don't move, these tiny houses don't move a lot, but you could move around the country some and see a little bit of the area. If you're tired of one spot, if you don't like your neighbor, you can just move. And if your work moves, then you can take your home with you. Another thing is in Eglin Air Force Base, they came to us and they said, you know, we have RV parks in most of the Air Force bases. So our military people could have a tiny home in the RV park. And when they get transferred, they wouldn't have to disrupt their family to move in order to go to another place, another base. And then there's a guy by the name of Luke who, when he was 12 years old, he and his dad started building their tiny house in the backyard. And if you go to the YouTube video and find him do Luke's tiny home, you can see his tiny home. And the way he talks about it, he says, hey, that siding was left over on my uncle's job, and that door my grandmother got me. And he's talking about this home and how prideful he is of how he built it and the bonding that happened between him and his father while they were building. That could never have happened unless there was a tiny house on wheels that he could have built. And if anything goes wrong with it, he knows how to fix it because he helped build it. Here's this. How about this for an idea? Oh, somebody's got a raised hand. Joe,
Oh, I'm sorry.
you can unmute. Go ahead.
Yeah, would it would they be illegal if they weren't on wheels? Because if they're on wheels, they're regulated.
Well, that's the challenge. If they're on wheels, they're in the gray area still. And if they're on foundations, yes, they are regulated as a single family dwelling. And we'll talk about some of the standards, but on wheels, there's, and I don't have this on my slide, but they're not taxed as real estate if they're on wheels, which is another possible reason to put them on wheels. Although I believe you need to pay your fair share of taxes. You know, if you're living there and using the schools and the roads and fire department, police department, you should have to pay some kind of taxes. And so that's why the jurisdictions are having so many problems with these tiny houses on wheels, trying to figure out what the heck they are. They're getting closer. It's coming. California, Colorado, Maine, and Florida next year will be supposedly passing some of these rules and regulations. But you're right, Joe. They if it's a tiny house on a foundation, then they are have to get a permit and build it. If they're on wheels, then the jurisdictions, what they call the authority having jurisdictions, are not being able to figure out what to do with them. I'll talk a little bit about that later on. What if you're sending your kid to college and instead of paying a dorm fee, you buy a tiny house and he can live in that tiny house while he's going to college for 4 years. And then when he graduates, he can either sell the tiny house for cash, he can rent it out to another student, or he can take it with him for a home. And that way you're not throwing your dorm fee out the window. Also, there's some trade schools like Albemarle High School in Virginia and 9 high schools in Kentucky. There's a lot of high schools and colleges that are building tiny houses, and they're teaching our young people trades like electrical, plumbing, and carpentry. And they're doing it with tiny houses on wheels because once they complete the house, they can auction it off and they can take the home someplace else and do it all over again next semester. Also, a friend of mine has some property and there's a stream running through it. And on one side of the stream, he can put houses, and he has. On the other side, he couldn't do anything because it was in the floodplain, but the county let him put tiny houses in there because they were movable, and in case of a flood, he could get out. And this is probably the biggest one right here, tiny house as an investment. There's a lot of Airbnb tiny houses out there. I know Sprout Homes is putting them up in Colorado in the ski resorts and renting them out 250 or more a night. And I know we had ours near Legoland, and it rented out 22 nights a month at $95 a night. I just talked to a guy this last week that's building tiny houses as wagons, covered wagons, and they're glamping. And he's building 70 of them this year because they're going into the RV parks and stuff like that. So it's a great business. There's a company out there, if you want to Google it, it's called Getaway, and they're building tiny houses, 40 and 50 of them, in, about an hour to two from cities, and they have a business model of renting them out on the weekends, and they let people wake up. They have a big window right by the bed, wake up and see nature, and they put their cell phone in a box and lock it up, and they have s'mores and a fire starting kit. So it's the whole idea that they use these tiny houses as hotels and outdoor living type things to have an experience of city dwellers that have never gone camping before. So that's some of my ideas of why they were on wheels. So what makes a tiny house different? Here's the problem, guys. It's the chassis. On a tiny house, the chassis is the floor system. Usually the plywood is screwed directly to that chassis. There's usually a thermal break in between it, but the chassis is actually the floor system. And there's nothing in the dwelling code that addresses a chassis as a floor system. And then there are also how kind of a foundation. Can you just jack them up on the jacks that they have, or do you have to put any kind of piers or something underneath of them? So that makes the tiny house on wheels different from anything that these authority having jurisdictions and these places and cities and counties have seen, and they really don't know what to do with them. They say, well, if it's on wheels, it's DOT, and you go to DOT and they say, no, that's a home. We don't do anything with that, and they keep passing it back and forth. The other thing that these tiny houses have are lofts and sleeping lofts, and that's what makes them function. In other words, if you have to put a bedroom in there on the first floor, then that takes up a lot of square footage. But if you can put the bedroom over top of the bathroom and the kitchen and a loft, that makes a whole lot more space in your tiny house so that it's more functionable as a home to live in. And so that's when IRC came out with Appendix Q for lofts. It's still not on wheels in Appendix Q. It's on foundations, but it created the ability to, number one, define what a tiny house was, 400 square feet or less. And number two, how do you treat lofts? How do you access the lofts? How do you egress from the lofts and things like that? And then the tiny houses on wheels, they do have to be movable. 8.5 feet wide by 13.6 tall is the most of the requirements. Some states will allow you to go 14 feet tall, but If they're on wheels and you build them 13.5, you can pretty much go anywhere. If you go bigger than that, up to 11 foot, 11 inches, you need a wide load sign. Over at 12 feet or more, you need front and back escorts. But you would need a special use permit and a CDL license to move them. But the point is, if you are a manufacturer of tiny houses or you're building one for yourself, and you're not going to move it once or twice in its lifetime, or once or twice a year, you may be better off going 10 feet wide to give you that extra elbow room rather than having to stick with that 8.5 feet wide. But that's what makes them different: the chassis, the foundation, the lofts, and they are movable. So this is a chart here that kind of shows everything. And this chart you can find on our website, or you can take a picture of it here. But basically, we start out with the tiny house on foundation. It's built to the local building codes. It's on a permanent foundation. It's inspected by the local building department. And at the end of the day, you're going to get a certificate of occupancy. The next column is your factory built or modular homes. They're the same thing. They're built to the local building code, whatever state building code is, or the local building code. But they're inspected by a third party in the factory, and they receive what's called an insignia on that tiny home built as a modular. And then when you bring that out to a site to be installed, the building code official only needs to look at the foundation and the utility hookup, and he's going to give you a certificate of occupancy for that too. Now, with all of these tiny homes on foundations and on wheels, you still have to meet the zoning requirements. So I've built a tiny home on foundation. I built a tiny house on wheels and legally put them on property, on real estate. But the zoning said that there was no square footage requirement on this real estate that we put it on. So we could build. I built a 20 by 12, which was 240 square foot tiny home. Got building permits for it with no problem at all. Then we jump over to the RVs. You have your park model RVs, which are 399.99 square feet, 400 square feet or less. They're built to the ANSI 119.5. Let me say that again, because I'm going to be talking about this. The standard that they're built to is ANSI 119.5. They're inspected by third parties, and they're designed for seasonal and recreational use only, temporary use only. Same thing with the RVs, but they're built to an NFPA 1192, and they really don't have any structural in 1192. You can have, for a travel trailer, you can have a pop-up with canvas sides. So on the green area, that's your tiny houses on wheels or your movable tiny homes. And there you still have to deal with the authorities having jurisdiction, which includes the DOT and the building department and the zoning department. And they're prefabricated off-site. They're inspected by a third party, or they're not inspected at all, because some people are still building them without having them inspected and certified. And we have what we call some NOAA standards, which I'll talk about, that they're built to, and they're usually between 150 and 400 square feet, and they're designed to either be used as temporary or as a principal residence, and that's really predicated upon the authority having jurisdiction, allowing the NOAA standards or whatever standards are built to be lived in full time. The other thing I want to talk about is why we're getting pushback from the jurisdictions is RVs are inspected differently than a home. An RV, basically, you go to a manufacturer that's going to build, 70 a month, let's say, and they go in and they inspect 3 of the homes, and they say, okay, yeah, you know how to build a home to NFPA 1192 or ANSI 119.5, whichever they're building to. And then they let them build whatever they want to build. They still have an in-house employee that's a quality assurance person, and he carries a traveler through with a checklist and checking off all of the items that need to be inspected. But then every 90 days, the third-party inspector pops in, and as long as they're still looking like they're building to the standard, then they let them go another 90 days. The challenge that the site-built home, let me talk about them first. They're inspected, if you don't know, they're inspected at various stages. You get a building permit, and they're going to say you need the foundation inspected, the rough plumbing, rough electric. You need an insulation, you need a structural, you need to have the final electric, final plumbing, and a lot of times they're looking for the drywall nailing. There's things in the final inspection all the way through. So they are inspected every home. But think about this: if I was a builder in a subdivision, and I said, Mr. Inspector, I'm going to build 3 of these houses. I want you to go inspect them, and then I want you to give me COs on the rest that I can build in 90 days. They wouldn't like that idea, but that's basically what we're telling them when we're asking them to approve these tiny houses built as an RV and inspected like an RV, that we're asking them to approve these things. There's a lot of tiny houses that you can build in 90 days if you're in a factory cranking them out. So that's been kind of the challenge. But does anybody think we have a housing crisis? Anybody? Absolutely, we do. And so what California has done is they said, okay, every city and county is going to have an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit ordinance written. So we can allow accessory dwellings if you already have a home there, you can add another home, and they have to write that ordinance. And so what they've been doing is in Fresno and San Luis Obispo and San Diego and LA and other places are passing ordinances saying, if you have a tiny house that's built to the ANSI 119.5, remember I told you, remember that ANSI 119.5? If it's built to that ANSI 119.5, then you can live in it full time. It's not seasonal or temporary housing. Same thing with the Brevard County, Florida. Same thing with Maine and other places. They're saying use the ANSI 119.5. Well, here's some pros and cons with that, guys. Number one, first of all, I'll get to you, Leanne, in just a second. First of all, the standard says in ANSI 119.5 that the unit has to be wider than 8'6" in order to be able to use the ANSI 119.5 standard. The building code official said, we don't care. We want everything 8 foot wide or 10 foot wide. We want it built to the ANSI 119.5 standard because the NFPA 1192 doesn't have anything structural in it. And at least ANSI has 2x3s, and it's got some insulation. It's R5 in the walls and the floor and R7 in the ceiling, which is woefully insufficient. So that's a con. But the nice thing is you don't have all the red tape in the product when you build a tiny house to ANSI 119.5, because it doesn't have to have like a modular where you have to have a third party in the plant doing an inspection of the thing as it's going forward. So that's why we feel like the ANSI 119.5 is better than NFPA 1192, but it's still woefully insufficient. So let me take that question there, Leanne.
Yes, sir. It's Eric is asking if we sell the tiny house on wheels, does the DOT need to inspect it as well?
Well, it depends. It depends. Across the country, every state is different. In some states, you get a VIN, you get a certificate of origin from your trailer manufacturer, and you get a VIN with that, and you can put your tiny house on that trailer, use that VIN, and when you sell it with the trailer title and a bill of sale for the tiny home. In other places like California, they don't give you a VIN. They want you to build your tiny home and then take it to them, and they'll give you a VIN for it that way. So everyone is a little bit different in how they handle things. So, and I know some places like for instance in Florida here, you have to register yourself as a RV manufacturer if you're going to fall into the ANSI 119.5. You have to, and you have to also have your dealer has to be registered with the state. So you can't be the seller. You have to have dealers that sell your product. So every state's a little bit different. So I don't know where you're from, but if you could go to your DOT and check that out. But I'm telling you, things are happening right now that's changing all of that. in California, yeah, they take it to get the VIN number, but then the DOT never sees it again because it goes into a side yard or a backyard and usually stays there for the life of the tiny home. Joe, you got your hand up?
Yeah. What does ANSI stand for?
American National Standards Institute.
American
It's
National
a
Standards
standard writing.
Institute.
Yeah, I believe that's what it is. American National Standards Institute.
Yeah.
Just like ASTM, there's standards, right?
ASTM, and I'll talk about the ASTM standard that we're hopefully going to get in just a few minutes. I'll talk about the different standards that are being worked on currently.
So, but they're not codes.
They're not codes. No, codes are, the standard is written, and then once it's adopted by a state, it becomes the code. So it's the Florida building code, it's the California building code, but they usually use IRC, International Residential Code, and IBC. So yeah, they're standards, they are not codes. They would still have to be adopted by each state. But even IRC has to be adopted by each state. There's some states that have adopted the 2015 IRC and they haven't adopted the 2018 or the 2021. And the states have to adopt the appendixes. So they could adopt Appendix Q in the 2018 or the Appendix AQ in the 2021 separately if you're going to have a loft in a tiny home. So the way the codes work, and that's a whole seminar in itself, but the way the standards and codes work is that they can be written, but then every jurisdiction has the authority to not only amend the standard or the code, but to adopt it. Now, I'm going to talk about a standard that we have written, and I'll talk about how that's been adopted by local jurisdictions, and it becomes code once it gets adopted by them.
So I have another question. Then,
oh, go ahead. If you
the
got another one, go. Shoot.
yeah, the NFPA. What does that stand for?
National Fire Protection Agency.
That's what I thought. So these are also standards, right?
Well, yeah, they're standards, but we also use NEC, which is NFPA 70. But it is in a book. It's called National Electric Code, but it still has to be adopted. But most places adopt the National Electric Code. In National Electric Code, you have Article 551 and Article 552 that address the tiny house, that address the RVs, travel trailers, and address the RV parks, and address the ANSI 119.5, which is your park model product. So whether in that chart back there that I showed you with the foundation, with the modulars, with the HUD and all that, they all use National Electric Code. They all use. So the only difference is that you might be able to use an article out of that National Electric Code if it's considered an RV.
Last question. So NOAA actually gives some credibility in terms of them being standards, almost giving them the authority of a code, but it's not a code. But you're actually validating or credible, you're giving some credibility to these standards. If somebody builds to the standard, you're sort of putting your neck on the line by saying they are acceptable. You're putting your stamp of approval on them as NOAA.
Yeah, I'll go into that a little bit later on. So if you could just hold up on that, and if I haven't answered your question by the end, then you can bring it back up. But I want to finish this, and then we'll go into a little bit more about that. So anyway, this is the Colorado, which is the first state that has written a tiny house state statute. They call it administrative rules. So you got codes, you got standards, you got administrative rules, but basically it's the law that, in other words, in order to build a tiny house on wheels to be lived in full time in the state of Colorado, it has to meet the administrative rules that Colorado has written. And so it's basically the 2018 IRC and the 2020 and National Electric Code, but they've amended that standard to say that you can use a built for purpose trailer and you don't have to have an engineer, even though the trailer, the chassis is not in IRC. They got around it by doing that. And you can be a registered manufacturer or a certified manufacturer. But as far as the foundation, they said, okay, you can go to the HUD standard and use that for your foundation, or you can have the tiny house manufacturer give you the installation instructions to show you how you're going to set up your tiny home. So he gave you those two options. So basically what they have, for those of you who don't know, they have what they call prescription standards and performance standards. And most performance standards are written like it has to withstand 130 mile an hour winds. It has to withstand, 50 pound snow loads or a seismic load. Those are performance standards. And then prescriptive standards say that, okay, in order to meet those standards, in order to meet the 140 mile an hour winds, you need to have 2x6 studs, 16 inches on center, with 7/16 minimum OSB nailed on the walls, 4 inches in the edges and 8 inches in the field, and on the roof, nailed 3 inches on the edges and 6 inches on the roof. And that's a performance standard. And so basically, you don't have to have an engineer stamp in a lot of places because you built it to a prescriptive standard that has already been engineered to meet those standards. Now, some places like Florida, they still want an engineer's stamp on it. But on tiny houses, for the most part, if you build it to the standard that they're looking for, you don't have to have an engineer's stamp on your plans. Although NOAA, since July 1st of this year, has asked all of our manufacturers and DIYers to send in a rough set of plans, so at least we know what we're inspecting with some floor plans and some elevations. So what we're inspecting to and what we see. So yeah, we're kind of blazing the trail for these tiny houses, Joe, just so you know. So Colorado said you have to have 5 considerations: affordability, movability. For the manufacturers that build less than 20 homes, you have to consider the DIY, and you have to consider the custom home builders. And I personally am not a politician, and I don't really like politics, but they do things with words. And do you see that one word in there that makes all the difference? Anybody see it? If you see it, put it in the chat before I say it. It's consideration. They had to consider these 5 things. It doesn't mean they have to meet those 5 things or make them affordable or make them a DIY able to build or custom build. They just have to consider it, and they did that. And now, since July, when this passed, they haven't had one tiny house manufacturer qualify, as far as I know. I know there's one that's getting close, but there's a lot of bonds and there's a lot of fees. There's $100,000 performance bond and all of that kind of stuff. So there's that going on in the tiny house world. And I'm not going to go into taxes right now, but if you remind me by the end, I've got a possibility of a question that I have in Colorado and other places that are making these things legal to be put on foundations and lived in full time and given COs. I've got a tax question for everybody. So remind me before the end of this to answer that question, Leanne or somebody.
Okay.
Good. All right. I'm not moving here. Let's move. All right. And here's the requirements for in Colorado. You can be a registered manufacturer or a certified manufacturer. And there's a lot of hoops that you have to jump through in order to be a certified manufacturer. But basically certified is kind of like the RV industry, where they just let you go ahead and build without having to have everything inspected. But they basically, what they're doing is they're saying every stage has to be inspected. But then when they get into the certified manufacturer, you only need one stage inspected. So if every house gets one inspected, one house gets an electrical inspection, another house gets a roof inspection, and another house gets a framing inspection, they're going to give you insignias on all of those houses, even though the rest of the house was not inspected. And so to me, that's not the best program that's out there. And I want to talk a little bit about what NOAA does. Before I do that, I want to talk about the zoning, because you have to deal with the building, and we're focusing mostly tonight on the building standards, building codes, administrative rules, and things like that. But you also have to meet the zoning requirements. Like in Brevard County, they said, yeah, you could build your tiny house to ANSI 119.5, but you can only put it in RV parks, mobile home parks, and agricultural property, or PUDs, planned urban development, planned unit developments, or urban developments. People call them different things. But what Terry Lathrop did is he went to a city council there in Lake Dallas, Texas, and he had this 1 acre with this old house on there. That's that white thing right at the top right there. And he had an outbuilding on it. And he drew up these plans with 13 tiny houses on it, with landscaping and parking all around it. And the city council gave him a permit to put these together. And all he had to do was put in the infrastructure, because 2 weeks after he got this approval, he had 72 applications for spaces to put tiny houses there, just so you know how big the need is for places to put tiny houses. So we've got a whole program. If you want to email, we can tell you how you can get that. A whole program, how to go from get the land, all the entitlements, all the permits, to the sales, to the exit strategy of tiny house developments. But that's not what this talk is about. But that's what this guy did, and he was successful in accomplishing that. And by the way, he did not use NFPA 1192, because they're 8 foot wide. He didn't use that. He didn't use ANSI 119.5. He did the NOAA standard. And so I wanted to tell you a little bit about the NOAA standard. The NOAA Plus standard in San Luis Obispo, they looked at ANSI and they said, you know, you have R5 insulation. Does anybody know that that's not sufficient? R5 in the walls and the floor, and R7 in the ceilings. So we had at that point in time, we had R13 in the walls and the floor, and R19 in the ceilings. And that's exactly what they adopted. And then Blaine County, Idaho was first, and then City of Haley came in and passed. And that's when I tell you they're passing ordinances using our standard, Joe, like you were talking about. We're becoming the go-to people for standard writing, but we don't want to write standards. But that's what we've had to, because the ANSI was woefully insufficient and there wasn't anything out there. So we stepped up to the plate and wrote these NOAA Plus standards. And so these jurisdictions are taking notice. And so they adopted not only the NOAA Plus standard in City of Haley, we did have to increase the R value of the insulations for them. We had to go to R28 in the ceiling, I believe. We did have to increase the R value, but they basically took the NOAA Plus standard and they are using that standard to build their tiny houses too. And, you know, in places like Fresno and San Luis Obispo, where they did pass the ordinances for the ANSI standard as ADUs, as far as I know, there really haven't been any houses built to that standard because it's just not working for them. But this standard is working. There's 4 houses already been built since this passed in February of this year. So it's really working in Idaho. The NOAA Plus standard is. And they also are requiring that it be inspected, which I'll tell you in a minute. Some of you that are already members already know how we do our inspections. And then Mississippi adopted the ANSI Plus standard for tiny houses that are built on foundations as modular homes. And so they've taken the NOAA Plus standard to do that, not just the ANSI Plus. And so here's our 2 standards, guys. We started out with the NOAA Plus, which is the one on your right-hand side, which is based off of ANSI 119.5. And then we made amendments to that. And then the other standard is the NOAA dwelling standard. And that standard is based off, similar to what Colorado did, the 2018 IRC and the 2020 National Electric Code. You can go to those standards, go to our website, and you can read those standards and see what they are and know how you can build to either one of those standards and build a tiny house on wheels that is better than the RV standards that some people have been using. But we don't want to be the standards writer. We just want to be the inspection company. But we wrote these because there wasn't anything out there. But I want to now talk about two initiatives that are going on right now to write tiny house standards. The first one is ASTM. Back in September of 2022, Janet Thome spearheaded this, and we got an approval as a subcommittee at E 06.26 is the subcommittee. And they just had a hearing in October in Washington, D.C. So we are actually on the move to write 5 different areas. And I think there's a 6th one that's called energy too that we're adding. But the subcommittees are going to be tiny houses on wheels, foundations, inspections and administration, the tiny house communities, and then microgrids, which is basically your utility hookups, so that you can hook up multiple tiny houses to one septic system or one water system or one electrical system. So that's what's going on in ASTM right now. And then ICC THIA, they sent out a PINS notification this spring that they are writing standards, prescriptive and performance-based compliance methods for tiny house foundations and on chassis. And they're doing plans and they're doing inspection and certification. They're calling it certification in this one. And so they're using as their base some standards that they recently published, which are the offsite construction standards of 1200 and 1205. So I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes. Oh, there's a hand. Go ahead, Joe.
I was talking to Janet about that as well and was going to get involved. I just didn't have enough. I'm just so swamped, so I couldn't do it. But I'm very interested in staying on top of your progress with the ASTM standards. Will you guys be reporting on those periodically?
Yeah, and I'm going to be on the committee, and I've also applied to be on the committee of the ICC standards. And so whether I'm on the committee or I'm not, I am going to be in the meetings. So we will know what's going on, and our staff will know what's going on. Rich, who really will be the main spearhead on this, will be in the meetings, and he'll probably be our liaison to what's going on, and we'll be communicating that through emails to our members of what we're, and possibly writing blogs and updates. But Janet Thome will definitely be sending out emails. She's on top of the ASTM initiative, and Dan Fitzpatrick and THIA is behind the ICC standard, and so they'll be publishing, updates on that. So that's really what's happening there. I just before we run out of time, I just want to take a couple of minutes. And did that answer your question, Joe? Okay. And talk about NOAA. We're a third-party trade association that we started back in 2015 when it was the Wild Wild West, and we've become nationally known as the go-to people for tiny houses on wheels, because we inspect 100% of each tiny home, not 100% of 3 and then let you run with it. Every tiny house that we do, we inspect 100% of each one. And we inspect it like a site-built home. We inspect the chassis, the framing, the rough electric, rough plumbing, insulation, house wrap before the siding goes on, underlayment before the roofing goes on. We do a final electric, final plumbing, final structural, and we've got 2 inspectors on the call right now that can verify that that's how we do things. We inspect them with an app that we have. You download the app, and then when you schedule your inspection 24 hours in advance. And so at the time of your inspection, you get a text, you click it, the app opens up, and now you're talking to the inspector, and he's seeing through the camera of your smart device of what you're inspecting, and you walk through the whole inspection through with him. That inspection is digitized and stored with inspector notes, videos, and photos, so that we can go back to 2016 when we first started doing this and pull out inspections of the first tiny homes that we did for the insurance companies and the jurisdictions and the banks. And that's why we were the first one with farmers they put out, it's what, it's not Farmers, but it's their subsidiary. Foremost Insurance
Foremost.
came to us. Yeah, and they came to us and they said, we're only going to insure RVIA and NOAA tiny houses on wheels. And then now other people have been insured, but we spearheaded that because of what we're doing, trying to create freedom for people to live safely where they want and how they want in a home that's safe for them to live in. And so that's been our goal ever since. So we have manufactured members, we have DIY members, we have educational members, and your membership includes your seal. You have to, I mean, your membership and your seal. Basically, you have a membership fee, an annual membership fee for manufacturers, and then you have a seal that you buy for every home that you build. DIY includes the seal, educational includes the seal, one seal. But then here's the thing: it includes all your inspections, but free consultation. That is incredible, guys, that you can get free consultation with our inspectors. We used to have, I think Tony was telling about a guy that used to call him all the time, a member saying, hey, I'm at Home Depot. What kind of plywood do I buy? This kind of stuff. I mean, it's not that bad anymore, but because you have free consultation, you can actually find out what's the right thing to do before you go and do it. And of course, having all your inspections digitized and stored, hopefully that when places like Colorado come on board with tiny houses, that they're going to allow the work that we've done here at NOAA to be grandfathered in to their requirements for tiny houses on wheels. And so one final thought for today, guys, we failed. We were talking to this guy about, he'd already built one, and he had a 15 amp circuit running into the into the kitchen. And you need 2 appliance circuits in the kitchen. And me and Tony spent 40 minutes trying to convince this guy that he needed to change that line, that white wire, and put a yellow wire in. And I put a 20 amp breaker, not a 15 amp breaker. And finally, at the end of our conversation, he said, well, I don't need to have NOAA and certification in order for me to sell tiny homes. So just cancel my membership. I'm not changing this one. I'm not changing the one that I already built. And so I know, and we here at NOAA know, that we ultimately failed with this guy because some unwary buyer out there bought these homes not knowing what's behind the walls. And at least it could be breaking, the breaker could be popping, or it could in fact be a fire hazard. So I really felt bad about it when we did that, but it happened. And it's probably happening a lot more that we don't even know about, where people are building tiny houses that aren't inspected and certified. Or I know of one guy that got, I'm not going to say the company, that third-party inspector, but they gave him 150 seals, and they came in every 90 to 120 days. No, 12 to 18 months, every 12 to 18 months to do an inspection. So obviously that program doesn't work. And so that's why over the last, since 2016, we have developed a name for ourselves out there that when you put NOAA certified on your unit, it means something finally after all these years. So guys, I promised to tell you how to get this set of plans. So if you'll email robin@noaacertified.org, and in the subject line, just put 2/2 tiny house, and we'll get you those plans out to you of your 2-bedroom, 2-bath tiny house, all on one floor. So that's it for me. Any questions, etc. I'm open. We got a couple of minutes here.
Anybody have any questions? Joe, is your hand up again or still? You have a question?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. Robin at NOAA Certified. I missed that website, that email. NOAA.
NOAAcertified.org.
.org, and ask, what do you want to put in the subject line?
2/2.
2/2 tiny house. Okay. So the question I have is, I don't know which inspector is inspecting our house, but we're building a house with THIMBY, UC Berkeley students out in Richmond, California. Our plan is to create a tiny house building academy. And we're working with the city of Richmond, Richmond Build. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's a building academy. It's a 12-week building academy. Students go through that academy. They learn the basics. They don't really go through the full build. They get to like framing. But what we want to do is create a graduate program, scholarship type thing, where the top graduates can come and build, do our build, and we'll pay them. And so, do you guys have any? Could we consult with you on trying to create that program, or do you do that kind of thing?
Well, obviously, we're a third-party inspection company, and we would love every house that you build to be inspected and certified. So what you can do is contact our office, or either info@NOAA Certified or Robin@NOAA Certified, and kind of tell us what you're trying to accomplish, and I'll make sure that it gets routed to the right person so that they can get back to you and help you structure an inspection process and a certification process that's going to work for Richmond. And I think I've heard of you guys too. Have either of you guys, Leanne or Tony, heard of this project that Joe's talking about?
I have heard of it, yes.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
haven't heard of it. I know we
yeah.
do
The
Rockwood. We do Rockwood School District out of I think they're Missouri, aren't they? Yeah, Missouri. We
Yeah.
do homes for them.
the
We have a,
nonprofit sponsoring the sponsoring nonprofit is called Tent Makers. The actual build is by UC Berkeley architectural and engineering grad students.
mm,
The one last question is, are you guys a performance or prescriptive inspector?
We are performance. We're
Okay.
performance, and prescriptive means that you have to have an engineer design it. But these standards that were written are performance standards. I mean, prescriptive standards. Maybe I'm getting them wrong, but the standards NOAA Plus and the NOAA dwelling are prescriptive standards. It tells you 2x4 studs, 16 inches on center. It also says that you have to have certain wind loads and snow loads, but those are prescriptively written in there unless you do something outside the norm. And then we're going to ask you to get an engineer to certify that they will meet those requirements.
Okay, so prescriptive is engineered, but performance is not.
The other way around.
Oh, it's
Prescriptive
performance is engineered.
performance, you need an engineer. But if you build a prescriptive standard that's already been engineered and approved to meet those requirements, you don't have to have, in most jurisdictions, you don't have to have an engineer unless they just, like Florida, just wants an engineer to look over your plans and make sure they do meet Florida building code.
Thank you.
we have a hand up, Kyla Nitra. Did I say that right? If you want to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi. Hello.
Oh.
You can call me Kyla.
Kyla.
And I actually just sent it in the chat. But so I am more of a developer than a builder. I'm building a tiny home community like for vacation rentals up at Lake Texoma. And the first question is, do you guys do inspections in that instance? And then the second question is, I am offering services to guests that if they want to pursue tiny homes, that I would give them a list of NOAA certified builders. Do you guys provide that list or share that list of builders that are within your network?
We actually have on our
yeah.
website under the, I'm sorry. Did you want to
Go
get
ahead.
that, Rob?
Go ahead, Leanne.
On our
You know
web-
the answer to that.
I know some stuff. On our NOAAcertified.org website, if you look at the membership tab, there is a builder map, the third button down. You can look at all of our certified builders by state. So did you say you're in Texas?
Yes, so I'm building on the Oklahoma side, but yes, it'll be regional, like Dallas, Oklahoma City, Tulsa. Yeah.
We have quite a few in Texas, not as many in Oklahoma, but you can definitely pull that up and see our builders in the United States and Canada.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mhm.
And then
as far as
Dan?
your subdivision, yeah,
Oh,
as far as
sorry.
your
Say that again.
subdivision goes, you had a question regarding that, and basically, it depends on the jurisdiction. We are a third-party inspection company. All our inspectors are ICC certified in plumbing, electrical, in plans review, and those types of things. As far as the development itself, you would need probably a local developing's a lot different. We have a whole course on that. If you want to get that course, I've forgotten it, that we did with Scott Banta. But you can get that, or you can join our Tiny Life Tribe, and you can get that for free. But it goes from start to finish, finding the land and all the way through the development stage. But there's not just an inspector that you need. There's a team that you build, and it tells you what the team is that you need and how to build it, who you would go with. So some jurisdictions are going to request that certain things be inspected, like the roads, the roadbed, the infrastructure, the water, the sewer, and all that. But I know a place in Texas, because on that development course that we have, Scott talks about a friend of his in Texas that all they said was, well, you might want to put some paved roads in if you're going to have, I forgot how many tiny homes they had. So it really depends on where you're building and what the jurisdiction wants. We are a third-party inspector. If the jurisdiction says, yeah, NOAA is going to be inspecting the homes and inspecting, we'll allow them to inspect the setup of the homes and utility connections and the infrastructure, then we'd be happy to do that for you. But that would have to be on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, that's fair. So I actually will look into that course. So I've already purchased the land. I'm already working on, I'll be done with the designs this month before we go into start talking to contractors. But I kind of lucked out. So it's because it's in Oklahoma, there's not as many like city rules and restrictions to kind of go through, but we're building them all to code, like housing codes. So NOAA may be a little bit, I don't know if it's more strict or not, but yes, we're working through that. But if anybody wants to know, or if in Texas, my company is Petite Luxury Homes. So we're working on building out all the fun stuff and offering those same services to guests or whoever wants it. Whoever wants to live in a tiny home, we're here to help.
Sounds great.
Awesome.
Sounds great. Yeah. Well, Leanne, let's just keep in touch, and we'll see if there's anything we can do to help.
Yeah.
Kyla.
Sounds great. You have my email. And Dan has his hand up, Dan Kellogg. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask?
Yeah, hi,
Dan.
thanks. You had, Robin, you had mentioned a tax question or something like that, and I'm not sure if that was specifically related to Colorado or not, but that's where I'm located, and appreciate all that info.
Yeah. And it is Colorado, and it's in all the other states too. Here's the question. When you build a home and you have a lot, the lot is taxed as a lot, correct? Do you know when it turns into a home? Anybody put it in the chat or raise your hand? Just put it in the chat since somebody's got a hand up already. And all right, I'll give you a minute. All right, it turns into a home when you get a certificate of occupancy. And do you know what day? There's a certain day of the year that if there's a home on that property, you get taxed as a home, which is higher than a lot. Does anybody know what day that is? Put that in the chat. All right. Now, I'm not looking at the chat, but if anybody wrote down January 1, you're a winner. If your home,
it's one day off.
If you have a home on that lot with a CO on January 1, the tax assessor's office comes out or they don't even come out. They just tax you as a home rather than a lot. If you're building a home and it's not completed, no CO until after January 1, you get a whole year of that being taxed as a lot. So here's my tax question. In Colorado and in other states, as they do this, Colorado has what they call a temporary foundation. And specifically, Mo was talking about, and Sam, they were saying, well, what if somebody in Denver has their tiny house built as a modular home and they pass all the codes and inspections and everything, but they want to put in a temporary foundation. So when it's cold in Denver, they can go to Arizona and warm up and then they come back. So here's my question. You have this lot, you have it approved for a tiny home. On December 26th, you pick up your tiny home and you move to Arizona for a week, and there's no home on that lot on January 1. Now, do you get taxed as a lot or a house? We don't know. The question is, we don't know. Those are some of the issues that we're having with this new movable tiny home, because it wasn't there on January 1. And that's the magic date, January 1, for the tax assessor to say that it's a home and taxed as a home, or it's a travel trailer or a RV taxed as an RV. All right,
Robin.
any more questions?
Hey,
We,
Doug
Reddy
here.
has his head.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, Reddy has his
Can I go ahead
hand
and
up,
ask?
and then we'll
Hi,
take.
everyone.
Hi, Reddy.
Hi, everyone. Hi. So, Robin, the question I have is, I'm in Arizona. I'm a first timer. I'm just, I just started building my tiny home. I was in touch with Tony. It was a great help, Tony. Thank you. It kind of encouraged me to move forward, march forward. We are building as we speak. And my question is, basically, my intention is to build these and sell them to my customers. I have many people that are interested in buying these from me, but I don't know how to transfer the ownership to them, because in Arizona, as far as I know, based on what I read, there is no concept called a tiny home, um, and you have either an RV or a mobile home. Mobile home is a manufactured home, which is fixed to the ground. It is not on the wheels. But if I go to DMV, they may register it as an RV because it's on the wheels. Again, there will be an inspection, they said. So there's some confusion here. If after I build it, do I take an certificate of origin to transfer the title to the person who is buying it, and they go to the DMV and register it as an RV? Can you please clarify on this if you know anything?
Sure. And yeah, that's what I started out the talk on, was the confusion about what the heck is a tiny house. And yeah, if you're building it to the NOAA Plus standard, and I don't know which standard you're building it to, but if you're building it to the NOAA Plus standard, then I would go and register it as an RV myself. I wouldn't rely on my buyer to do that. I would try to handle that, or find out from where it's going, because it may not be going in a place that is in Arizona. They're on wheels; they can move all over the place. So if it's considered an RV, usually RVs can travel around pretty good. But if you're building it to the NOAA dwelling standard, then you may have to go to the jurisdiction. And I know Arizona is one of the states that we're working on getting approved, our built manufacturers approved as, you would have to become approved as a modular home builder, and then you could get an insignia from the state, and you would have a modular home that could be placed on a lot and inspected, and you get a CO at that point. But the other thing Arizona has done, and I just want you to check this out, but Arizona passed an ordinance that said if you build a tiny house to the ANSI 119.5, you can live in it full time. So if it's going to stay in Arizona, that's what I would do. I would build it as an RV to the NOAA Plus standard, and then I would get an RV VIN number for it. Consider it an RV. You may not have to have an RV VIN number. Maybe just with the NOAA seal on it, they would consider it an RV. And then you can live in it full time based on the ordinances that have been passed 3 years ago in Arizona.
Great. Thank you, Robin. I'm going to follow the NOAA Plus I guess, yeah. But thank you.
And can I interject? I'm Eric Piscata, owner of My Housing. I'm in Arizona, both developer and builder, and it Arizona is very nice. So I think overall, what you would look into is if you're building the trailer, you actually need the manufacturer license for trailers. If you purchase a trailer from someone else and then you start building on top of that, if you're going to get the MSO clean, then what you would do is get a new vehicle dealership license. If you register to your name first, then the trailer is considered used. So then after, you would get a used vehicle dealer license. So that is something that you should look into. Arizona is very friendly, very supportive. And if you have any questions, I'm in Scottsdale, Arizona. And yes, feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Can you please?
put your
Yeah.
yeah
Your
go
number or
ahead,
email
Grady.
address. Oh, sorry,
Yeah, put it
I
in
was
the
going to say
chat.
the same thing, Eric. If you can please
Okay.
place your email address or phone number to contact you in the
Sure.
chat.
I
Thank
can
you, I
connect
appreciate
you to Eric. I have been emailing both of you. You're both members, so I can connect you tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Yes,
All right, one
thank
more
you
question.
thank you for that.
One more question, Leanne, then we're going to have to scoot.
All right, Doug,
Hey,
do you have a question?
yeah. Well, no, I more of a point. I sit on our planning board here, it's land use board in Richmond, New Hampshire. And the question that you were bringing up about how is it taxed, the issue that you're running into is that it's actually a vehicle. So it goes by the VIN, right? So when it goes by a VIN, the municipalities are looking for a registration like they would a vehicle. This is a part of why we're having trouble getting them financed too, because it's based on a VIN. It's not a physical house. And the manufacturing process that a lot of lenders look for, or the inspection process, is much like a house. But in any case, the answer to your question, I believe, is going to be no, and there's no way that you're going to be able to enforce that or make that pass because it is a vehicle, it is movable. It's going to be very hard for any municipality to force a tax on something that isn't there. Does that make sense? I mean, you might be able to do something like the property is now commercial, or it's multi-use residential, and get a higher tax rate for it. But I don't see it ever being a way to tax that property from that, because it's a vehicle and it's movable.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Doug. The only way it would happen is if you passed an ordinance that said that once it becomes attached to the property with an auger, or however when they set it up, then it becomes real property. Then you could tax it. I know they have mobile homes or manufactured homes that are in manufactured mobile home parks that are taxed as a vehicle, but then you can take that same mobile home and put it on a lot and surrender the vehicle tag, and it becomes part of the real estate. So it's state specific ordinances that we're going to be seeing come down the pike. But that was just one trivia question that I had for people that are in politics, that we're dealing with it's called a new housing type. Everyone, HUD, ICC, everyone's calling this a new housing type, and that's exactly what it is. And there has to be some new laws written for this new housing type.
Yeah, I agree. Now, I can tell you in our town, Richmond, New Hampshire, good luck finding property, by the way. But as long as you buy 3 acres with 250 feet of frontage, put in 4-foot frost walls, block and level and tie down your home and hook it to utilities, we're going to tax you on a real house, and you can have a tiny home here. But it has to be your only residence. We don't allow detached ADUs.
Right. And that's specific to the state and the county that you're going to be placing your tiny home guys all the way down the pike.
Right.
Well, I'm gonna turn it back over to
All right.
Leanne. Thank you so much for your time.
Yes,
You wanna close
Robin,
out?
I just want to personally thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you started very early this morning, and I know everyone here appreciates all the information you just shared with us. So thank you for making it a success tonight. Again, we wish you all happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Thanksgiving. However you celebrate, we hope you enjoy yourselves. We'll see you in January, and look for the email because I'm going to have a very special guest the third Wednesday in January. I don't have the actual date offhand, but watch the emails if you're signed up right now for Tiny Talks. You don't have to do anything. You'll get the invite on that day. So thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful night, and we will see you soon.
Thank you,
Good
everyone.
night.
Thank you.